We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd love to call this Climate Committee meeting to order. I hear that the recording has started. So just as a reminder to everyone, we have a few logistical items that I'll cover before we take the roll. This meeting is being live streamed on Zoom and recorded. So members that are here in the room, just a reminder to please use the microphone so anyone who is online can hear your contributions. Please also identify yourself when making or seconding a motion so that the secretary can capture those. And hopefully everyone who came in and is in here in person completed the sign-in sheet located in the hallway. If not, please do so before you leave. If anyone's here from the public that would like to make public comment, there were comment cards out in the lobby as well. So please pick up one of those, add your comment, and hand it to one of the CMAP staff members over here, and we can call on you at that appropriate time. For anyone who is participating in Zoom, please keep your microphones muted unless called upon to speak. This will help eliminate excessive background noise, and you can use the mute button on Zoom or the *6 if you're on your phone. When appropriate on the agenda, we will request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak using the chat box. Staff is monitoring Zoom and will recognize you when it's your time to speak. All right. Now I will hand it over to staff, I believe Nora, to read the call or call the roll.
All right, great. Aaron Dernbaugh.
Present.
Edith Macra. Elena Grossman. Great, she's present. Ethan Kimbrell. Jack Chan. Absent. Michael Kent for Mary Nickel. Present. Thank you. Matthews, we're going to join later, just a second. Naomi Davis. Paul May.
Here.
Robin Halgrim.
Present.
Ryan Wilson.
Present.
Sarah Egan.
Present.
Scott Kukendahl. Absent. Stephen Schaefer. Absent. Susan Mudd.
Here.
Great. We're going to hear from Thomas in a second and Vanessa. Suzanne Malik McKenna.
Present.
Great. And Francisco Lopez Zavala.
Yes,
thank you.
Present.
Great. All right. We have quorum.
Thank you, Nora. So we can proceed. Thanks, everyone, for making it here to our in-person meeting. So we're able to convene the meeting. We did get a request from Matthew Santagata, Vanessa Ruiz from IDOT, and Thomas Millard from Waukegan to participate remotely. They've made the request in compliance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act, but it does require majority vote of this body by voice vote. So I would need a motion and a seconded for their participation. Susan Mudd just moved, and
Seconded.
Suzanne Malik McKenna just seconded. So should we do all those in favor?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. So the secretary can note that that has been passed. We're moving on to agenda item 2, agenda changes and announcements. Are there any agenda changes to what was distributed?
No, there are not.
So we are now going to move on to the CMAP updates. These will be presented by Bill Barnes, Deputy of Regional Policy and Implementation. Bill, take it away.
Thanks, Aaron, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful sunny May Day. Can't really tell from the shades, but also this is our only in-person meeting of the year, so it's really important that we all get in here and establish quorum. So thank you for that, and hopefully the agenda and the content that we're going to be presenting to you will justify your journey downtown. So just a couple of updates, largely focused on some engagement work that we've been doing here at CMAP around the Climate Action Plan, the CCAP that you've heard about extensively, and also the Century Plan. And I'll start with the Century Plan first. The Century Plan is going to be the subject of an extensive briefing that you're going to be hearing about a little bit later today. But it's the region's long-term vision for a better, stronger future for Northeastern Illinois. To support its development, CMAP is hosting a series of Catalyst events to celebrate our successes and bring together leaders from government, business, civic, and philanthropic sectors to align around implementation and regional coordination. We've recently hosted 2 such events, the first of which brought together more than 150 stakeholders from across the region to celebrate the release of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. Lots of energy, lots of enthusiasm and momentum about how to move this forward into implementation. We're really excited to continue to partner with all our stakeholders on that. The second event focused on our regional water supply with an emphasis on governance. It was in alignment with the current Water Week. And if you were here, I'm sure you were impressed by the speakers. We had an informative and engaging presentation and Q&A after that, where the participants discussed what they were learning and how we can move forward as a region. Turning to the CCAP, the Climate Action Plan, the climate team here at CMAP has been busy over the past few months presenting to various stakeholders about the Climate Action Plan. Along with the Catalyst series that I mentioned before, the team has presented to the DuPage County Environmental Committee, the Lake County Planning, Building, Zoning, and Environment Committee, CMAP's Board, Transportation Committee, and Regional Economy Committee, the Union League Club, and the Clean and Equitable Transportation Coalition. Not listed there is the Climate Committee. I know you all have heard about it extensively. And I would say for those of you that are representing various jurisdictions, agencies, and divisions of those jurisdictions, if you want to hear more from CMAP presented to your specific audience, let us know. We'd love to bring the message to you where you work. Future presentations on the CCAP will include the Council of Mayors Executive Committee, the Northwestern Water Planning Alliance, as well as the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus Environmental Committee, and workshops at Transport Chicago. Keep an eye out for the climate team around Chicago. We're not just out talking to people, we're actually pushing out materials to help educate the residents here in the region. So we're publishing the first in a series of articles from the climate team about the Climate Action Plan. And for the next several months, we're going to continue to post articles examining various aspects of the Climate Action Plan, from human health impacts to sector deep dives. The first article examines how actions central to the plan, such as electrifying buildings, vehicles, and industry require a cleaner, stronger electric grid. Keep your eyes peeled for future CMAP updates. And if you're interested in the grid, take a look at the recording of yesterday's CMAP board meeting, where we had a panel of presenters speaking about the grid and the challenges and opportunities that the region faces. It's really interesting and worth a look. CMAP also extends its congratulations to the Illinois EPA on the release of the draft Illinois Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. The plan charts an ambitious path to decarbonize electricity, transportation, buildings, industry, agriculture, and more. It largely mirrors a lot of the recommendations that we put forth in our Climate Action Plan, but at a larger scale, the statewide scale. It also marks a major step towards achieving the state's climate goals while reducing pollution, improving public health, and expanding workforce opportunities for communities across the state. Implementing CMAPs and the state's climate action plans offers a significant opportunity to improve quality of life for residents in Chicago and its region and communities across Illinois, while strengthening the state's long-term competitiveness. Pivoting to water, CMAP recently hosted its second Shared Waters, Shared Future virtual workshop with the Illinois-Indiana Sea Grant, with a focus on creating a water sustainability plan. Speakers introduced water sustainability planning, shared peer examples, and explored how water supply considerations can be integrated into planning. The next virtual workshop, addressing utility, climate, and drought preparedness, is June 3rd. Typically, I give some high-level legislative updates, but we're lucky enough to have Ryan Gugis from our legislative affairs team, so he's going to give some updates later in the program. Just a couple more updates. First, on the Regional Transportation Plan, The work on the 2026 RTP is entering its final stretch. The team is completing the core plan along with its major supporting appendices, including the financial plan, the regional capital project list, and the system performance analysis. Together, these components form the backbone of the draft RTPA that will be presented for consideration next month. So at the June meeting of the MPO Policy Committee, the committee will be asked to vote on releasing the draft RTP for public comment. Pending that approval, the public comment period will run from June 12th through July 31st. So this is a key opportunity for residents, partners, and stakeholders to weigh in on the region's long-range transportation vision and its priorities. As a sneak peek, only for you VIPs, the RTP will detail strategies around mitigating pollution through GHG reduction and increasing investments in resilience infrastructure. As such, your consideration of the draft is extremely welcome. We'll provide a more detailed briefing at our next board meeting, or at our next committee meeting, excuse me. In the meantime, please keep an eye out for the draft RTP. And then finally, it is with great sadness and great excitement that I say Aaron Dernbaugh, who has been our chair for 6 years or 13?
Yeah, right.
Some.
Inauguration of this.
It's been a while. And Aaron has been a steady, enthusiastic, and consistent voice to CMAP as we work to curate information to bring to this committee in an effort to better engage this committee. Aaron is stepping down, and we will be entertaining at a later point in this agenda a nomination for a new chair. But I just do want to thank you, Aaron. You've been here longer than I have, and it's been a pleasure. Words of wisdom you want to impart before the leash is off and you're just a regular committee member?
Thanks. It's been interesting to make the transition from a committee member of the Natural Resources Committee and seeing the work and the focus we did then to this new focus of CMAP around climate and how some of those carried through, some of the water and adaptation resilience, and some new doors have been opened in that time. And, I think it's nice to see it capped off with the comprehensive climate action plan. It seems like a great time to step down and hand over. And I'm really looking forward to not just the role and responsibility of this committee continuing to evolve and grow, but also CMAP's role with that. So thanks for that recognition.
Well, it's greatly deserved. And, speaking to, continued doors opening for CMAP in the climate space, I anticipate in the future the agency is going to continue to lean into its responsibilities in those spaces. And, we're going to see some real exciting programming come before you that's going to advance the goals that all of us hold near and dear to our hearts. So those are all my comments. If you have any questions for me, I'll take them. Otherwise, we'll proceed on.
Opening it up to committee members for any questions for Bill. Robin?
Just want to thank Jesse Altman once again for coming out to a Lake County committee meeting and presenting on the CCAP. He did a fantastic job, and we had a lot of board members interested and asked follow-up questions. And I'm just curious, has any other municipality or county requested another presentation after that?
Not yet, but we're open to it, Robin. I part of it was your own initiative, right, to come to us and see the connection. So encourage the rest of you to come and ask. Okay. Yeah, happy to make more presentations and get people familiar with the content.
Okay, if no other questions, we will move on to the next agenda item. So the next item is new members. So we have 2 new members joining the committee. I'm going to ask them to each just introduce themselves and say a little bit about their role and what they hope to bring to the committee. First up, we have Suzanne Malik McKenna replacing Deborah Kutska to represent the Cook County Department of Environment and Sustainability. Suzanne?
Thank you. I don't know if this is working. Is it? Great. I'm really thrilled to be here. I've been in my gig for all of 6 months, so still trying to figure out what it all means. But we are in the middle of a climate resiliency strategy as part of an overall strategic plan. Got a lot to learn. getting back into the swing of things in government. But we're excited to be part of this and collaborate. Thanks.
Thank you. And always lovely to see you, Suzanne. Um,
Favorite colleague.
For those that don't know, I used to work for Suzanne back in the city of Chicago days. So next up, we have Francisco Lopez Zavala is replacing Samira Hanessian to represent the Illinois Environmental Council. Francisco, would you like to say a few words?
So my name is Francisco Lopez Zavala. I am here representing the Illinois Environmental Council instead of Samira moving forward with this climate committee. So looking forward to learning a little bit about what the committee is about, and really just here for this meeting as an observer primarily. At IEC, I hope track CEJA's implementation statewide. And so I have a bit of a background with like clean energy, workforce policy, and all the initiatives in CEJA. So thank you for having me.
Welcome, Francisco. So our next agenda item is the approval of the minutes from our last in-person meeting. So way back, for those of you that were here, you'll have to put on your, way back machine. A copy of the minutes from May 22nd, 2025 was included in the meeting packet. For those that were there, if you've had a chance to look through those minutes, if there are any requested changes or corrections, we can welcome them or invite them now. If not, I just need a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Ryan Wilson provided a motion to approve and a second. Some Susan Mudd seconded. So all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. They are moved and adopted. Thanks for that. All right. So our next just piece of work, since we're here at our in-person meeting, is that we need to adopt or approve the proposed meeting schedule for the coming year. We only meet one time in person, so we approve all the meetings for fiscal year 2027. I believe they were distributed and shared in advance of the meeting. Nora, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, there's not.
All right. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look at those. If not, they're right in front of you as an attachment to the notes for today's meeting. And I will also invite a motion and a second by any members of the committee.
So moved.
Robin Halgrim moved and Paul May seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Thank you. Those dates are approved. Excellent. And those are in the notes if anybody needs them. And I'm sure CMAP staff will send around the meeting invitations there. All right, done with that. Now we're moving to item 4.2, the designation of a new chair and vice chair. Bill?
Yeah, appreciate it. So every year CMAP designates a chair and vice chair for this committee. It's for time immemorial, we've designated Aaron, but with respect to his wishes, we have reached out to Robin Hallgrim from Lake County, and she has graciously accepted our request to serve. And we have also reached out to Mary Nichols from the city of Chicago, who has agreed to continue in her current role as vice chair. So I think, this is a matter for consideration by this board, but, I would say before we have a vote, I'm just wondering, Robin, if you have any thoughts you want to provide?
Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Hallgrim. I am the Sustainability Programs Manager for Lake County, Illinois, so the Lake County government. So I serve as internal operations with them, and then I do a number of community programs. I've been with the committee a little over a year now. I've always been in awe of the amount of expertise that has been brought to this group, and so I really appreciate the staff members for reaching out for the opportunity. And I hope to really get to know all of you as best I can. And it's a really exciting time. Like Aaron said, he's capping off his experience with the finishing of the climate action plan. And so I hope to work really well, instituting and implementing all of those projects and work plans with all the great people in this room. So thank you.
All right. So we are just going to vote on that transition of the chairship and the continuation of the vice chair for Mary Nickel. Could I welcome a motion?
So moved.
Suzanne Malik McKenna passed the motion, and Susan Mudd, sorry, got the two Suzannes and Susans tripped up there, seconded. So all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, Robin, for your service. It'll be great fun. I think moving next, we're going to go into legislative update. So we're going to invite Ryan Gugis, there's Ryan, to share an update on any of the relevant bills that are filed or being considered with the Illinois General Assembly. And take it away.
Good afternoon, members of the Climate Committee. I'm Ryan Gugis. I'm with CMAP's Intergovernment Affairs team and here to provide a few federal and state legislative updates relevant to the committee's work. So in the federal space, draft surface reauthorization language is expected to be released by the House in the coming weeks with top line funding in the range of $550 to $600 billion in funding. The current reauthorization bill, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, is set to expire on September 30th, and it is increasingly likely that Congress will pursue a continuing resolution or a CR, just considering the limited amount of time between now and the expiration of IIJA. We're continuing to engage with our congressional delegation and elevate the importance of sustainable funding and really sustaining the top line funding for IIJA. To meet the region's infrastructure needs. And we'll continue to keep this committee updated as those conversations evolve. We know things continue to move, right? We keep hearing that draft language is going to be released and then that changes. And so, again, just like I flagged, right, a continuing resolution is probably what we'll see from the federal or from Congress with the reauthorization. So. In the state space, the Illinois General Assembly they're headed into their final 2 weeks of the legislative session, and they're scheduled to adjourn on May 31st. So passing the FY27 state budget, remains a key priority for the General Assembly, in addition to other legislative measures that are still active in the process. And I know in your packet of materials, we outlined some key pieces of legislation that we've been tracking that, like I said, are still active in the process. And so we're just, continuing to monitor and see what will happen and weigh in as needed. One thing I want to note is the Northeastern Illinois Water Governance Report bill was introduced this session as House Bill 4689. And it would direct CMAP to develop a report of legislative recommendations regarding the region's water resources and governance structure. The bill passed out of the House chamber and it's being sponsored by Senator Bill Cunningham in the Senate. Currently, conversations have paused. I know proponents are, they're working with the governor's office to really understand, how we can, or how they can be thoughtful in talking about not only the region's water governance structure, but thinking about that statewide. And so, I know Bill had a chance to testify back in Springfield in March, and so we're keeping ourselves just engaged in the process as those conversations progress. But we know water is a very important and critical resource to not only our region but to the state. And so, as you think about the Climate Action Plan and all the incredible work that we're doing at CMAP and that this committee is doing, want to be experts and help inform that process in a thoughtful way. So another key piece of legislation that was filed this session is the Power Act. This is an initiative of the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and it's being sponsored by Senator Ram Villavelam and Leader Robin Gable as Senate Bill 4016 and House Bill 5513, respectively. The legislation establishes some comprehensive environmental, water, and energy regulations on hyperscale data centers by requiring them to assume some of those energy costs, report water usage, and conduct some environmental assessments for community impacts. Both House and Senate committees, they held subject matter hearings on data centers. During this time, municipalities, labor unions, environmental advocates, and other stakeholders testified about some of the competing interests surrounding new data center development. In terms of the legislative process, House Bill 5081 that leader Robin Gable is sponsoring, it didn't advance past the House committee deadline, but Senate Bill 4016, it was given a committee or third reading deadline extension until May 15th, which is, I know, the end of this week. And so the bill is currently assigned to the Senate AI and Social Media Committee. And so, again, another piece of legislation that we're just, monitoring and keeping our, sort of eyes and ears open to see how that progresses. It was given a deadline extension to this week, but given this time around, with the General Assembly, you tend to see bills get further extensions as negotiations and conversations are being had. And so we'll see what happens as of tomorrow, as of Friday, to see how this bill is going to move or advance. But again, just keeping our eyes and ears open to see where things will land. Outside of that, I think that concludes my legislative update. We'll continue to keep this committee updated as things progress, and happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thanks, Ryan. This is terrific, and the memo is really helpful as well. So folks who haven't had a chance to review that, are there any questions that any committee members have for Ryan? Go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation, Ryan. A question about the data center bill. You said in the House it didn't get out of committee, or it wasn't heard in committee?
That's correct. Yeah. And so what you see happen is, like, a lot of times identical pieces of legislation will get filed in the House and the Senate. They'll be making their way throughout the process in their respective chambers. The House bill, that didn't advance, but the Senate bill was still active in the process. And like I said, they did some subject matter hearings. And so, on the Senate side, at least, procedurally, the bill is still active. And so, I'd
The
imagine
deadline's tomorrow?
it was given an extension,
Right.
Which is for tomorrow. That's correct. And so things tend to move pretty quickly around this time in session, right? Given the May 31st deadline. And so as of today, it was granted a deadline extension until tomorrow. But who knows what'll happen tomorrow if the Senate will give it another extension.
If it isn't voted on, can it go to veto session, or does it?
Procedurally, it can go to veto session if nothing happens this session, but, you also see where, the language that's provided for in the bill, sometimes they can take that language and file an amendment on a different bill to keep the legislative process alive. And so we've seen that happen before too. So yeah, we'll see. Perfect. Oh, another question?
Yeah, go ahead, Susan.
Sure.
Sorry, about the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Act that you
Sure.
mentioned. It's clear that Congressman Graves has in mind enacting a very large electric vehicle charge to try to cover for all the costs of the Highway Trust Fund.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, given the importance of electric vehicles and electrification in CMAP's plan, whether this is something that CMAP will be urging the Illinois delegation to fight against.
Sure. I don't know, Bill, if you have anything, but
Yeah, so as we put together our legislative agenda and our priorities, it's definitely informed by our existing plans. To the extent that there's alignment between our recommendations and our strategies and our objectives in the various plans, including climate action plan, those are definite talking points that we use when we're engaging with the elected officials.
any other questions?
Looks like
Awesome.
Robin has a question for you, Ryan.
I know Lake County regularly, we employ lobbying services with a firm each year. And I don't know how common it is for most municipalities, counties, to make sure that there's at least some sustainability focused bills on their either keep watch agenda or actively work with. Does CMAP at all have methods of encouraging, hey, if you pay for a lobbyist for your entity, is there at least one environmental bill that gets on your agenda each year? I'm just curious if that exists, has that been considered?
I don't think our governmental affairs staff are out there telling municipalities what to get behind, but
Right,
no,
not
no,
specific
no,
bills,
no,
right.
I totally hear where you're coming from, but as we look at, say, climate action plan implementation, it's critical that we cover all of our bases. And if there's proposed legislation out there that has alignment, again, with the objectives and strategies that we're recommending, that's something we can call out. Not necessarily through our governmental affairs staff, but through blog posts, through social media, through white papers. Yeah, that's actually a really good, that's a good call out.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. You didn't mention, but I know it's because you've got a long list, NETA and the possible NETA trailer bill. Is there any news on that?
Sure. I know,
Oh,
early
the
on-
Northern Illinois
Sure.
Transportation Authority, sorry.
Yeah, I do believe like conversations are being had in terms of what that looks like, what the cleanup language is. I think that has yet to come to light at this moment. But again, we're monitoring and keeping keeping the lines of communication open with legislators, with stakeholders to see what that may look like. But that is something that we are aware of and we have on our list of things to look out for. Some sort of like NETA cleanup language, and should legislation get filed and that that be introduced, we'll definitely like I said, keep our eyes open and weigh in as needed. So thank you for that flag.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Michael.
Hi, we've been tracking State Bill 3336, which recently passed out of the Senate. It's a bill that would regulate, quote, motor-driven cycles, so vehicles that are larger than e-bikes but smaller than traditional motorcycles.
Sure.
The bill also includes, it was originally designed to regulate those, quote, motor-driven cycles, but in a recent amendment has expanded the bill to include a lot of regulatory language regarding traditional e-bikes, e-micromobility, other sorts of devices that, generally speaking, are positive in terms of having a better impact on the natural environment. Just curious if CMAP's been tracking this bill. As we understand it, it seems to be moving fast, and it's now in the State House.
Yeah, sure. No, it's I appreciate the flag. It's definitely on our list of legislation that we're tracking. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's an initiative of the Illinois Secretary of State. And so I know like it's still going through the legislative process, but it's on our list of bills that we're monitoring and tracking to see like how those amendments are being filed and what those provisions are, and if there's sort of alignment with some of our work that we're doing at CMAP, or if there's opportunity to provide some of our research, our data, as the legislative process plays out. So
Appreciate it. Thank you.
of course, yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank
That
you all
was
so much.
very
I appreciate-
informative.
yeah, I
and
appreciate the
it
time.
sounds like there's a lot of information within your memo to take back to our individual organizations and authorities. Thanks. Okay, for our next item, we're going to turn to the Century Plan update. A very big undertaking, and Elizabeth Ginsburg, Senior Policy Analyst, and Matthew Marth, Policy Analyst in the Regional Policy and Implementation Team, are going to provide us an update. And this is the most substantial part of our agenda today. So looking forward to it.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Aaron said, my name is Elizabeth Ginsburg. I'm a senior policy analyst in the RPI division here at CMAP, and my pronouns are she, her. I haven't had the privilege of speaking with many of you before, so I'm excited to have this conversation today. Many of you have been at the recent Catalyst events that Bill mentioned, but my colleague Matt Marth and I are excited to kind of give you all a more in-depth overview of the Century Plan. I think it's been, if not a year, longer than a year since it's been like a main agenda item here with the Climate Committee. In particular, we want to talk about what has been on our minds and hear from you all as we work to develop a new strategic agenda for the region through the Century Plan. Next slide. Yeah. So you may or may not know that CMAP is a relatively young organization. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last fall. And our agency was originally established in the early 2000s when a broad-based civic effort kind of pushed together two previously existing organizations. That included the Chicago Area Transportation Study, or CATS, which covered transportation planning and federal programming responsibilities that now fall to CMAP, and the Northeastern Illinois Planning Commission, which covered state responsibilities related to land use, demographics, and planning for natural areas and natural resources that again now fall to CMAP. Until now, most of the planning that CMAP has done has occurred under 2 generations of plans, onto 2040 or go to 2040 and onto 2050 and their respective updates. We're proud of the legacy that these plans have given us, both as an agency and as a region, but they were pretty significant lifts. For example, onto 2050 took more than 3 years to develop and consists of nearly 500 pages of content, dozens of recommendations and strategies that exist across 5 chapters and 3 planning principles. On the whole, the regional plans that we have been a good investment. To give a snapshot of some of the value and successes that they've delivered for the region, we can look first to our technical assistance program. This program was created following Go to 2040, and it has offered local governments customized help on transportation, water, housing, and other local challenges. And since 2011, the program has helped municipalities with more than 300 projects, and it has unlocked tens of millions of dollars in federal and state funding. The success of CMAP's technical assistance work also led to CMAP's first ever allocation of $2 million in state funding to kind of extend this work. Next, CMAP, following in the footsteps of the regional plans, worked with the Illinois International Port District to complete a master plan that reimagines the future for its 1,800 acres of active shipping operations space. This work successfully secured over $30 million in funding to rehabilitate the dock wall and preserve the port as a national freight hub. Just a couple weeks ago, they announced that the Port District is starting phase 1 engineering on a new multi-use trail that includes a bridge across Lake Calumet, which will give neighborhoods on the far south side and recreational users across the region a better bike and pedestrian connection to Big Marsh Park and the Pullman National Monument. Through onto 2050, we were able to demonstrate that the region did not have adequate transportation resources for infrastructure investments, particularly related to the growing backlog of maintenance projects. So onto 2050 recommended several reforms related to performance-based prioritized investment that would support the region's transportation goals. And as a result, we helped to shape Rebuild Illinois, which is the state's current capital program. Rebuild Illinois also raised the gas tax for the first time in my lifetime and indexed it to inflation to maintain its purchasing power. And it also created the state's first set aside for transit capital projects, making sure that we think of the transportation system as an integrated multimodal system. Last but not least, it has been a long-running goal for the region to work together on economic development. Local governments in the region have long operated on their own, often resorting to poaching and even negative marketing tactics. So to fulfill on a recommendation in onto 2050, CMAP worked during the pandemic to help assemble the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, which brought the 7 counties and the city of Chicago together for the first time to work on business development efforts. Now in its 4th year, the partnership is continuing to deliver results. GCEP was instrumental in securing the multi-million-dollar investment that will be building the city's first quantum computing campus. As I said, we're proud of our regional planning legacy, and we continue to see significant progress. Regional planning helps us to anticipate big picture challenges and opportunities, to develop consensus among regional leaders on issues of shared importance, and to identify areas in need of more dedicated and responsive planning. At the same time, past efforts have been clunkier than we would have liked, often forcing us to shift from planning for many years to implementation for many years, back to planning again. So never one to rest on our laurels. We're continuing to evolve our planning practice here at CMAP, which brings us to the Century Plan. We're shifting gears and currently collaborating with regional leaders to prepare a new vision for Northeastern Illinois, which will provide high-level policy guidance on what the region needs to achieve together. Rather than one kind of behemoth comprehensive plan to rule them all, the Century Plan will provide a more nimble, modular approach to setting a strategic agenda for the region. This vision will act as a North Star and will set the direction for future initiatives and strategic plans that can be more tailored to specific issues in transportation, climate, and the regional economy. You all are very familiar with one component of this new constellation, the Climate Action Plan, which is a good example of how important issues don't necessarily fit within the regular transportation planning cycle. By identifying and building consensus around the region's top challenges, this new approach will allow us to be more responsive to policy windows when they appear, funding opportunities when they're available, and to rethink how we work with coalitions to address the region's top challenges. Now, broadly, how will we be pulling this together? Right now, we're in the first phase of work where we're gathering perspectives and data points. This includes regional trends information and local strategies from communities across the region, as well as some strategic foresight work, all of which we'll be discussing today. And then this summer, we'll turn our focus to synthesizing all of this input and identifying grand challenges and shared priorities for the region. The plan is to bring the Century Plan to the CMAP Board and MPO Policy Committee for adoption in fall 2027. And eventually the Century Plan and its subplans, including the Climate Action Plan and the Regional Transportation Plan, which is set for adoption this fall, will serve as the region's comprehensive plan as a collective. Before we dive into the data trends, the fun part, are there any questions about this process? Great. So to start the Century Plan, we took a broad look at the existing conditions in our region and published the State of the Region report. We do have copies available if you haven't gotten one yet. And we want to focus today on some of the high-level climate-related takeaways, but we encourage you to take a report and flip through it on your way home. The report is packed with information on regional topics where we, CMAP and the rest of the region, have levers that can help move the needle on things like transportation, economy, housing, climate, and more. And to prepare the report, we looked at dozens and dozens of data points, but ultimately prioritized the trends that will be most impactful to the region's quality of life and future opportunities. One major conclusion of the State of the Region report, next slide, is that Northeastern Illinois possesses unique strengths that make us stand out nationally and give us a competitive foundation for continued growth. In particular, we benefit from expansive regional systems and assets like our transportation network, our diversified economy, and our rich natural resources. These strengths are the result of generations of investment and strategic development and conservation decisions. As we identify the future vision of the region, we want to build on these assets and maintain them for the long term. Most notably for our conversation today, the region has expansive natural resources that support ecosystems, recreational activities, and climate resilience. In particular, we have extraordinary access to freshwater resources like Lake Michigan and a system of rivers, channels, and canals. These assets are crucial for our natural environment and provide valued opportunities for recreation, as well as low-cost, low-emission transportation of goods. Additionally, just over half of the region's 2.6 million acres are used for agricultural and natural lands, and 200,000 acres are set aside for forest and conservation districts. Having been protected and maintained over time, these resources strengthen our quality of life and our resilience to climate change. At the same time, there are some emerging trends that present challenges for the region. In recent years, there have been changes that alter the infrastructure and the services that local communities need. Tensions are challenging the region's capacity to pursue additional growth, and dynamics are compromising residents' quality of life. So the State of the Region report dives into some of these emerging trends, including the region's cost of living, its water supply, housing market, heat vulnerability, and more. Understanding these trends enables us to coalesce around shared priorities and plan for solutions. Unsurprisingly, climate change is already affecting people across northeastern Illinois. Recurring flooding is one of the region's greatest climate challenges, causing costly damage and destruction wherever it happens. In the time since ONTA 2050 was first adopted in 2018, federally declared flood-related disasters have cost the region more than $570 million. And while this number speaks to the damage flooding has caused local communities, it still doesn't capture the additional uninsured losses that have fallen on residents and local businesses. In the future, we can also expect more days of extreme heat. Without significant emissions reductions, the number of days above 95 degrees is projected to increase from our current average of 2 days per year to 45 days per year by the year 2100. Based on factors measuring exposure, sensitivity, and adaptability, some areas of the region will be more vulnerable to the impacts of extreme heat, in particular large portions of Cook, Kane, Kendall, and Will counties. Extreme heat will also impact our transportation system. For example, many of the region's bus stops and train platforms currently leave riders exposed to extreme heat. Coordinated regional action will be critical to limit these long-term impacts. As those of you who were at last week's Great Lakes High Stakes event will recall, despite tight constraints around Illinois' use of Lake Michigan water, day-to-day governance of water from the lake remains highly decentralized. The 172 municipalities that rely on lake water independently set their rates and manage their own infrastructure, which leads to wide variation in oversight, pricing structures, and system conditions. Many communities, particularly those facing long-term disinvestment, currently struggle with challenges related to water loss, infrastructure age, and lead service line replacement needs, and they often lack the capacity to address them independently. Looking ahead, more effective water governance structures will be crucial to ensure that Lake Michigan and our other water resources can continue to support the region for generations to come. Last but not least, and as many of you all know intimately from your work on the CCAP, reducing greenhouse gases is our main lever to mitigate the severity of flooding and extreme heat. As the region seeks to reduce emissions and buildings, vehicles, and industry all shift from fossil fuels to electricity demands will substantially increase. This means the grid must do two things at once: become significantly cleaner and have significantly more capacity in order to reliably serve the growing demand. Although much of the region's current energy use occurs outside the electric system through gasoline, diesel, and natural gas, the transition will require shifting much of that demand onto electricity and making sure that the grid can support it. With that, I'm going to, not quite yet. So while much of this may not be surprising news, especially to you all, the findings of the State of the Region report are supporting the conversations that we're having about what the region should do to shift from today to mid-century. As Bill mentioned, we've also been hosting catalyst events around the region to celebrate the areas where the region has made progress and to identify critical challenges in the future. Besides the release of the Climate Action Plan and last week's water governance event, Future events that will be focused on the transportation system, on public trust, and on the balance between growth and conservation will seek to identify and build consensus around forward-looking regional solutions. Like the State of the Region report, these forums will pose big questions on what the region needs to do to plan for future growth. But the top-line regional picture is just one way we are trying to understand current conditions. CMAP is also learning what local communities are already planning and doing. We're working closely with partners to understand how key challenges and opportunities are being experienced on the ground. Local governments have been central to this effort. The plans, investments, and day-to-day decisions that are being made across municipalities will shape how the region meets the challenges highlighted in the Century Plan. Northeastern Illinois has a wealth of planning resources that CMAP can draw on to ensure the Century Plan reflects the realities and ambitions of communities across the region. Using vision statements from community plans. Next slide, please. We found common themes that range from preserving and being good stewards of our natural resources, as we've discussed, providing opportunities for all, from housing to business growth to connecting people to good jobs, providing accessible and connected communities through transportation networks that work for all users of all abilities, creating thriving and livable communities by creating spaces where people can gather and walk and that celebrate unique community and cultural assets, ensuring resilient economies with vibrant centers by building on existing economic assets, and finding balance between the preservation of open space and agriculture and pursuing growth through the building of housing and the attraction of new jobs. Of course, there are tensions between these visions as well as the goals that fall within them. For example, a common goal across plans in the region is the preservation of natural assets. Communities have talked about this in a few different ways. From monitoring existing resources to protect them from harmful conditions, to regulating development to protect watersheds, conserving natural features in open space, and investing in infrastructure that can mitigate runoff and efficiently use resources. At the same time, local governments are thinking about growing and the changing needs of their residents. Communities are talking about things like building a variety of housing to meet resident needs, leveraging existing assets and infrastructure to support growth, supporting and retaining existing industries, and connecting residents with good jobs and opportunities for home ownership. Community plans are also highlighting the essential role that regional assets play in meeting our needs, but also the important trade-offs that we need to balance. The ways that we prioritize our dollars and our limited capacity in things like roads, development, and utilities can support but also undermine local community and regional aspirations. And with that, I'll hand it to Matt to talk a bit about what we're learning about the future.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Marth. I'm a policy analyst here at CMAP, and I'm excited to be with you all, speaking with you all today. So before we dive a little bit deeper into some of the things that we're learning about the future, I want to spend a few minutes talking about something called strategic foresight, which is also sometimes referred to as futures analysis or exploratory scenario planning. So in addition to some of the trend analysis and listening for insights from local communities in different parts of the region that Elizabeth had just been talking about, we've also been using strategic foresight as another one of these tools in the early part of this process in shaping the Century Plan to identify emerging trends and potential blind spots that may affect our ability to advance the region's priorities in the decades to come. So to start, we have this definition here of futures analysis from the UK Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which is kind of a neat department, which makes some useful distinctions. First, that foresight is a systematic process, not an unstructured brainstorming exercise or some sort of effort to look into a crystal ball to predict what we think is going to happen in the future. And it's also a way to identify opportunities facing our communities and the region, as well as potential threats or barriers to advancing our shared goals. So here, compared to the picture on the top, where you can see this kind of base camp, you can kind of clearly see everything that's in the foreground. Strategic foresight asks us, with the second picture kind of illustrates, to lift our gaze up to the horizon, to look out to 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now into the future, to get a better sense of likely or even unlikely, but still possible developments in our region that might currently be off of our radar of conventional thinking and problem solving, but may still pop up. So foresight gives us a structured way to think about the future that can make our work more robust and resilient to significant shifts in our society, especially divergences from current trends that might not be accounted for in some of our more traditional forecasting or scenario planning or trend analysis that we might otherwise do. So as we've been moving through this kind of foresight or futures analysis process, whatever you want to call it, which has involved first a kind of horizon scanning process to look for some of these major potential future drivers of change. And it's also involved the development of 4 distinct kind of future scenarios of what our region might look like in 20, 30, 40 years. We've seen a certain set of especially impactful themes and emerging areas of uncertainty start to kind of bubble up to the surface and that are coming to the forefront, whether X, Y, or Z scenario plays out. Certain things are starting to crystallize as things that we think will be important and especially impactful to the region. So over the next handful of slides, I'm going to walk through a select set of some of these emerging themes, specifically ones that might have some level of overlap with some of our work around climate. So to be clear, this is not a totally exhaustive list of everything that we're thinking about, but some things that we thought might be interesting to talk to you all about. So first, we're seeing that what it means to work and what forms of work are available in our region are changing in ways that are going to have major impacts across many different sectors in our region. So post-pandemic work trends, work from home, other dynamics are intersecting with some longer-term processes of automation, as well as newer technological advances like different forms of artificial intelligence, which are all kind of intersecting and interacting to significantly reshape what it looks like to be a worker in our region. Of course, the effects of AI are going to be multidimensional, and the full long-term impacts remain to be fully seen or understood at this point. But and as these new technologies may both increase efficiency, but also disrupt the structure of our regional economy, these shifts are likely to transform work across different sectors, both white collar and blue collar work, law, accounting, manufacturing, healthcare. And we think that entry-level and service sector roles may be especially vulnerable to some of these changes and some of these new dynamics. And as Ryan alluded to with some of the discussion of the Power Act, we know that the physical infrastructure, the data centers that are underpinning some of these massive increases in computing and AI are already having major and often burdensome impacts on our regional resources, on our energy systems, on our land, on our water systems. And beyond that, these changes are going to have impacts on other systems as well, like education. So what skills do you need to be a worker here? Our transportation system, where does work take place? How do you get to work? How and where are goods being moved in our region? So that's kind of one theme that's bubbling up. So deeply intertwined with this kind of changing nature of work is our shifting dynamics with our economic landscape, a rapidly evolving economic landscape. Multiple macro factors are combining to rapidly change and in some ways destabilize our region's economy. So on one hand, booming e-commerce continues to lead to growth in warehousing and logistics, especially at the outer edges of our region in Will County, Kendall County, some of the collar counties. There's a great piece in the New York Times and Sun-Times a couple of days ago. I don't know if anyone caught that. And again, AI-fueled data center expansion is going to continue to place growing demands on our regional land, our energy, and our water use, as well as other forms of physical infrastructure, our roads. all kinds of different systems, many of which are decades old and were kind of built for a different era. In some cases, hundreds of years, not hundreds, 100 maybe years old. Homeownership and affordable rental housing continue to be out of reach for many in our region, straining our households and changing what it means to find a place what it means to find a home here. And at the same time, community disinvestment and changing retail patterns threaten to further entrench regional segregation and spatial inequality as certain parts of our region see major growth, major investment, and other parts of our region continue to struggle to have the adequate revenues to provide basic services and just maintain their infrastructure in a state of good repair. And then big picture beyond our region, the US's position in the global economy is shifting and potentially fragile as the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve and as China invests heavily in emerging high growth industries like solar and electric vehicles. And if US economic power continues to wane, governments at every level, state, county, local, are going to continue or will likely feel significant impacts, including recurring economic or fiscal crises. Next, as everything from utility grid infrastructure to our own doorbells become digitized and connected to the internet, there are opportunities for efficiency, but those are also going to clash with major new security risks to the systems that power our daily lives. So cyber attacks pose a major threat to everyone from individual senior citizens to entire local governments and the critical systems that deliver energy and water to our homes and our communities. And facing these challenges, regulatory policy often lags behind some of these newer technologies and the risks that come with them. At the same time, corporate control of these large, huge amounts of personal data pose significant privacy and other concerns for the people who live here in our region. And finally, this committee doesn't need me to tell this to them, but the changes in climate that are already impacting the region are only going to get more severe as global temperatures continue to rise and our local climate becomes more unstable. The impacts of extreme temperatures and extreme precipitation are already being felt and will continue to be felt by both residents and the systems that are designed to serve them. These events are not only going to directly strain transportation, energy, and water systems, they're also likely to have secondary impacts on our public health and our social service systems, as events like flooding and wildfire smoke can increase health risks like infectious disease and respiratory illness. And if these key social and infrastructure systems falter or fail, it will be the vulnerable populations in our communities, such as older adults, low-income populations, and communities of color who are going to feel the strongest impacts, both primary and secondary, from these extreme weather events. So considering these and other emerging dynamics that we don't have time to get into today, such as rapidly aging population, weakening trust in some of our public institutions, we know that the future landscape of our region is a complicated one. It's changing quickly, it's uncertain, and with uncertainty comes risk. We also know that we're facing some of these large-scale, multi-dimensional challenges, these are challenges that are well-suited to be solved regionally and collaboratively. And it's our hope that by undertaking this foresight exercise as a part of the Century Plan, that we will be more prepared, along with you all, and better equipped to take on some of these challenges together as a region. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth to lead us in a discussion about the mountain of information that we just brought before you all.
Thanks, Matt. And yeah, we know that's a bit of a whirlwind. There's been a lot of things on our minds, and now it's all on your minds. But we do want to hear from you all. We're curious, like, what opportunities are being missed? Where are natural regional partners, and where could collaboration be stronger? What trends are most likely to shape the region over the next 10 to 20 years? And where should we start building?
All right, thanks. Well, I'm sure we have no questions, so we'll just move to the next. No, I'm just, who would like to ask a question of either Elizabeth or Matthew? Go ahead, Naomi.
This is sort of, hey, everybody. This is sort of generic, and I'm sure it already exists, but I'm wanting to refresh my own knowledge and involvement. This is about org charts that are relational and process-based. In other words, I'm hearing about the parties that are communicating. I'm not sure what the infrastructure of that communication is. So I'd like to be able to look at that. So process and entity. That's my question.
I'm going to turn that to Bill.
In terms of like who we're talking to for the Century Plan?
Well, I mean, there's a great deal of communication going on, and there's data sharing. But for example, where would my community be on a map of relationship and process? I mean, at what level are you communicating for? I mean, I know you've got a whole state, but I'm a Chicago girl, South Side girl. So I have, we all have our context, right? We're listening from our own perspective. So I just want to understand for the whole, but I also want to understand particular to the constituencies that I represent, how we appear. Does that make sense, y'all? Getting that?
Yeah, I think you're getting at, how is your voice being reflected in these challenges, the trends, the final report, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, looking beyond myself and my constituents, to a system that really makes sense to me, that feels fully integrated, that seems to be modernized to quickly evolving ways of communicating these days.
I mean, Elizabeth Ginsburg, is it appropriate to talk a little bit about what Katie Reichstag is doing, or do you have the ability to speak to that? Because there is an entire component to this planning effort that is reaching targeted audiences, and whether or not we have a fully defined stakeholder map that identifies sort of the touch points that we're having and the quality and content of those touch points, that is something beyond me. But Elizabeth, can you speak to that a little? Can I put you on the spot?
Yeah,
I just want to go ahead and say my second question so I can get it in, which is with respect to the, really astronomical increase in electric use projected between now and 2100, are you calculating or distinguishing the electrification increases versus the AI increases? That's.
I can take that last one, Naomi. So our comprehensive climate action plan does project electrification and the impacts on the grid through the reduction measures that we identify in the plan. And that is largely not able to capture the data center impacts or other large growth users in the system, right? We were looking at our current energy supply and then going through the reduction measures. So I think that's definitely an area of future work.
So the visual you were showing was electrification.
Yeah, it's the implementation of the climate action plan over time.
Sure. And of course, AI is projected to be on steroids with respect to increases. So I'm really wanting to see how that.
Yeah, I think that was beyond the purview of that project, but it's definitely something that we recognize would be a value add in our understanding.
I think going back to your first question, I think the local insights work, as I mentioned, it's really kind of communicating with local governments and that kind of group of stakeholders. So we've been going to all of the council of mayors and councils of governments across the region. They also just met with the city of Chicago and a lot of departments that are working on various issues there.
With respect to Chicago, it would be at the governmental level of.
That's so far who we've talked to, but I think as has been mentioned, like we're happy to kind of go and give presentations at any other space where we're invited and kind of where it makes sense. And this is just the first phase of the project, so we have many years of work ahead of us.
other questions? I guess following up on Naomi's question about sort of structure and outreach and stakeholders, that was a pretty impactful section related to the strategic foresight risks. I'll use that term. And I can imagine that's appropriate for certain stakeholders, but not all. Can you maybe just speak to how, and it was impactful to me, but, and I can imagine for some elected officials and others, it would be very meaningful. But I guess how might you think about using some of those tools in a way that is for all?
Yeah, you all and the Regional Economy Committee are kind of getting the first glimpses of the foresight work, which has been really an exciting area of work for us. And we're still kind of trying to figure out how best to roll it out, because you're right, there's some scary things in there that are supposed to be provocative and are supposed to make us think about how we should prepare for the future. But we also don't want to like unnecessarily upset anyone. Upset is a strong word. But I think, so we have a variety of deliverables from our consultants. We're working with a group called CareSmith Design to do the foresight work. And their final report will be available over the summer. But more importantly, I think the synthesis work that the Century Plan team will be doing over the summer will bring us to the grand challenges that the Century Plan will kind of be seeking to respond to. And those grand challenges will give us a good structure to kind of weave in the future risks and how we're responding to them. So it'll allow us to kind of share with you all like why a grand challenge is a grand challenge and how it's helping us avoid or address future risk.
Thank you. Sarah, did you have a question?
Go ahead. There we go. So I'm gonna state my question, but qualify it first in the fact that I'm the person in the room, one of the persons in the room, representing kind of the natural lands, natural carbon sequestration interest, which of course does not help us reduce emissions, of course, right? So much bigger voices here at play in terms of how to do that. But in terms of carbon capture, certainly a big component of reaching that goal is through protecting our natural lands. So I want to talk about your first question with regards to that word awareness, because you pointed out, Katie, that 200,000 acres, or I think more than that now, have been protected in the region, and certainly we've made a lot of strides in the last few years with protecting our natural lands in terms of the funding that's been allocated at the county levels. But when we look at the goal from the first plan that you mentioned, right, the 2040 plan, we're still trying to achieve that goal. And in fact, we're quite behind in doing so. And so we've shifted that responsibility onto the 2050 plan. And now we're talking about the next century plan. So I think what I would hope to see out of that futures analysis is kind of a real awareness to our region in terms of what's actually required to reach that carbon reduction goal. We've noted that it's 3.4 million metric tons, right, off the top of my head. But what does that equate to in terms of acres protected? What does our, let's just say, next 100 years look like in terms of land protection to achieve that target? Acknowledging that land use decisions are, for the most part, irreversible. So we really need to be protecting natural lands, not at the continued pace over the next 100 years, but recognize that that actually has to happen now in order to successfully do so. So I think I would love to see the futures thinking incorporate the goals of the Climate Action Plan and sort of what that means in terms of each of our municipalities kind of, I'll just use my own term, fair share of land protection in order to meet that goal.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'll address that real fast. So all very valid points, super valid. And it all gets, that's the brass tacks is, we're going to have these lofty policy goals, but it's the implementation. It's how do we accomplish, how do we move the needle to get to the point where we need to be in 2050, 2060, 2070. And what's so exciting about this new approach is we have the Century Plan, which is this North Star, which has these broad policy statements. But the actual the nitty gritty, the details coming from these the constellation of plans. So when it comes to land conservation and carbon sequestration, what you're going to see is you're not going to look to the Century Plan for that. The Century Plan is going to identify the fact that this is an issue and it's a risk to the region, and but for action, it could have negative lasting impacts. But how do we resolve that? Well, we look to the Climate Action Plan and its implementation efforts to quantify exactly what's the delta between today and tomorrow, and how do we get there? So, valid question.
Thank you for that. I would just add, I totally understand that that's the goal of the Next Century Plan, but how do we then, I think that the trick is, right, that constellation of land use plans, like how collectively are we communicating and sharing this awareness so that it gets represented in that constellation of plans? Yeah. So thank you for that, Bill.
Go ahead, Michael.
I also wanted to speak about land use, but in a slightly different context. So we understand that transportation is obviously a driver of climate change, and we also understand that people depend on transportation when we're unable to get in our communities things that we depend on. So whether that's quality jobs or quality schools or access to food and groceries or whatever the needs may be. I'm curious, I think this is with regard to your second question about what's one challenge you can't solve locally without regional support, increasingly thinking about the need for additional community development and wiser land use decisions at a local level to ensure that people are less dependent on transportation, so that it never becomes an absent part of their lives, but we become less dependent on the 10, 15, 20, 30-mile trips that have become a little too common and obviously a driver of climate change.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Nita was mentioned earlier. There'll be a lot of opportunities in the near term to kind of think about how to use the transit system to meet the greenhouse gas emission goals. And also, I think there's a lot of opportunities in what the Century Plan is setting up to not only think about our regional economy, but also these kind of bifurcated local economies that Matt mentioned and the different experiences that residents throughout the region have.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
So I guess a question I have, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but thinking about as far as looking forward in the next century and I would say opportunity, which is sad, based on the challenge of serving more as a climate refuge in our region for the nation. Wondering about, you were looking at, I saw your electrification forecast, those types of things, but what about, I know you do population forecasts. That's what you do at CMAP, right? But I'm wondering how much you're considering and forecasting kind of the shores, et cetera, and what that might mean and therefore require for housing and transportation, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the forecast team has done a lot of work thinking about this. And I think a lot of the data out there and the analysis will show us that if there are going to be climate migrants to our region, like they're not going to show up until probably 2100. And so there's a data story, but there's also, I think the foresight work has allowed us to explore this in a more qualitative sense, to think about like if climate migrants show up sooner than that, what are the challenges that would arise from these new populations? What are the things we need to do to make sure that we can ensure residents that are already here have their needs met and new residents already have their needs met? So it's definitely a question that we hope to kind of continue exploring throughout the Century Plan. We have a colleague at a climate migration scenario planning event today up in Rogers Park, but I think it's not one that there's an answer to just yet.
I'll make a comment or a request, and this is sort of in advance of the next suite of presentations that you give. I really appreciate the slide that looked back at GoTo and Onto, but potentially drawing out the specific successes or achievements that are related to the work of this committee. And so if you could bring that back at a future workshop, that would be terrific, because I think maybe the natural resources and climate pieces weren't as reflected there, but also as you continue, the next meeting and the next meeting with other groups, not with this committee, but with others, maybe tailoring the results. Cause I think I'm somebody who likes to stop mid hike and look back at what I've, what I've achieved, to give me some strength to keep going. So, maybe just incorporating that in your setting it up helps us understand where to prioritize what we think can be successful in lieu of the uncertainty and the challenges that you put forward. So.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
I have a question. I don't know if it would be able to be added or just, I guess, thought about, but kind of thinking about the culture and the challenges of really different aspects of culture, whether it's shifting to change, wanting to see a change in behavior when it comes to transportation, or even thinking about the challenges that we face with having conversations with people of different opinions. It kind of falls into the cultural aspect, or thinking about I'm sorry, I just blanked, but like kind of this idea that there are cultural aspects that are challenging to kind of make these changes, and thinking about how, I don't know, how from a planning perspective we can facilitate those changes. And, cultural changes are very hard and long term, but even just thinking about that, because I think it can definitely be a barrier in moving forward. Just a thought.
I'll add something to that. And that's a great point. I was talking with our executive director, Erin Alaman, yesterday or the day before. I think Nora was in the meeting, and she was saying when she first worked at this agency in 2007, you couldn't even mention the word climate in anywhere in the region without, a hubbub. Now, we can say it anywhere in the region, and we can, actively program to reverse the changes that we're seeing that are directly tied to climate change. So getting that cultural change is through education, through repetition, through transparency, and it's incumbent upon us, as a planning agency, but it's incumbent upon you all to take this message and take it to your constituents, to your jurisdiction, and continue to repeat the mantra. The more people hear it, the more acceptable it becomes. So it's truly a challenge that we face pretty much in any aspect of planning. And it's just something we have to keep in mind, is that we are changing hearts and minds, and it doesn't happen overnight.
If I can add to that, I think one of the kind of recurring themes of the Catalyst events, and even when we talk about regional action, it really means like everyone is at the table thinking about how to address the challenges and what the obstacles are and how we can approach them together. So I think the cultural change will happen when we all kind of get together and push it forward.
So I'm going to, thanks so much, Elizabeth. Thanks, Bill. And yeah, it's good. I'm going to wrap up this agenda item. I know there's many more questions and comments we could make, but I imagine this is not the last time we talk about the Century Plan and its development. So we'll keep us moving right along. The next one is 5.0 member updates. I don't know if any member updates were identified for this one, but I'll just open it up. If anybody has anything significant they'd like to share with the committee. If not, I'm going to keep us moving to the end of the meeting. Other business is item 6. Was there any other business to come in front of the committee? All right. So nearing the end, the next item is public comment. So we will do any in-person attendees that want to make public comment. I don't think we had any requests looking at staff for, and then any virtual attendees that requested to make. Nope, nothing online. And last but not least, any written comments that were submitted?
None were submitted.
All right, thank you. With that, I'll just mention that the next meeting will be held as a virtual workshop on July 23rd at 1 p.m. In compliance with the Open Meetings Act. Looking forward to seeing you all online for that meeting. And especially Robin, at that meeting. Sorry. And if there's no other, nothing else from CMAP staff, I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here, and thanks for allowing me to chair this and the previous meetings. Appreciate it. Bye.
Yes. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.